Imagine this. You were given something precious, something that you've been waiting on for a long time, only to get comfortable with knowing it's in your life and walking through life with you, just to be asked for it back. I'm talking about Abraham. How God promised Abraham a son, that he would have his own seed. And he was already past the period that he was, I'm going to say eligible, according to man's standards, eligible to have a child, right? He was much further along in life. But at the same time, God made him a promise. And so here we are. Let's fast forward the track. We're in Genesis 22. And the Lord asked of Abraham to go up to the mount to offer a burnt sacrifice, a burnt offering. And he takes Isaac up there. And then when they're in the mountain, Isaac says to his father, well, where is the sacrifice? And Abraham's reply to Isaac is that the Lord asked for the burnt offering. Therefore, he is going to provide. Well, when he commits to being obedient and following through with the request for the sacrifice, at that point, there appears a ram in the bush. And I'm paraphrasing. But after the ram appeared, Abraham declares that it was in the mount that the Lord was providing. It was in the mount we shall see it. Jehovah Jireh, he calls him. He recognizes him as Jireh in his life. And the Lord was dealing with me about recognizing or repositioning myself from a place of rescue to provide. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, from rescue to provide. I'm understanding now about Genesis 22 being, if you will, like a type and shadow as it relates to Malachi 3 and 10, right? So Abraham, when he tells Isaac, one, that if the Lord asks for the sacrifice, that basically he says it's on God to provide that, right? And a lot of times, sometimes we're challenged as it relates to our obedience in what God asked for. And the Lord had to remind me that Abraham didn't have the seed to begin with, but that the Lord gave Isaac to him. He made him a promise that he didn't even have to do, but he fulfilled that promise. And then the Lord asked for the sacrifice, right? For him to go to the mount to offer the sacrifice. But in the scripture, in chapter 22, it goes further, and I'll put the verses in this. In chapter 22, where Abraham recognizes that it was in the mount we shall see it, here's what I want to remind you of. Is number one, that if God asks for it, he'll provide it. And then number two, obedience is what changes our position from needing to be rescued. Then number three, when God sees it, we'll see it. Well, when he sees what, you ask? When he sees your obedience. It was at the time that Abraham had committed, not just in his heart, but in his action, to sacrifice. It was at that point, not just in the mount, because the mount represents the meeting place where your obedience on the inside lines up with your action on the outside. And a lot of times that's what the Lord is waiting for. This is what changes our position from rescue. Let's define rescue, shall we? The definition of rescue is to free from confinement, danger, or evil. And then the definition of provide is to supply or make available. See, a lot of times when we are not depending on God, when we're not trusting in Him and developing a solid relationship, it causes us to be placed in position a lot of times when we need to be freed from, right? When we need to be helped or rescued. And if you're anything like me, I have said the words and sang the song about Jehovah Jireh, my provider. But I did not fully understand until I started searching the scripture more what, in fact, Him being a provider means, right? It's not just freeing me from, no, that's not Him providing for me. If I have a need and then the bill gets paid, the Lord provided. The Lord had checked me on that to let me know that, in fact, what I do is I bless you anyway. I give it to you first if I asked you for it, right? And then at the point that you make the decision to meet me in the mount, if you will. The mount represents something different for each and every one of us. For you, the mount could be your family. And then for someone else, the mount could be maybe a new business venture, their career. It could be personal relationships. It could be a personal goal that you have within yourself. But whatever that mount represents for you, it's your responsibility, as we already explained, that the Lord gives you the seed first. And when He gives you the seed first, if He asks for it in return, it is our responsibility to reach that conclusion that we will meet God in the mount. And as the scripture, as Abraham called and recognized who God was, where He says, in the mount we shall see it. When God sees our obedience, then we will see the manifestation of God's blessings or benefits as a result of our obedience and the sacrifice. And in Malachi 3:10, that's one that I do want to read in your hearing. And we'll start at verse 10, King James Version. It says, bring ye all of the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house. And prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes. And he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, saith the Lord of hosts. And all nations, remember what He did for Abraham, He says to us, and all nations shall call you blessed, for ye shall be a delightsome land, saith the Lord of hosts. I love in the scripture how the Lord is, for one, He's asking us for a thing. But remember back in Genesis, when the Lord asked Abraham to go and sacrifice, Abraham's response to his son was that if the Lord asks for it, He will provide. Well, in Malachi 3:10, the Lord asked of us to bring the tithe. So if He's asking for a tithe, then that means that He has already provided you the necessary means to tithe in the first place. You see, that's why we're discussing from going from rescue to provide. I had the struggle once upon a time myself of making a decision. Well, can I afford to tithe? But if we understand the totality of what God is trying to do and get us to, He's trying to get us to the mount. That makes me excited. He's trying to get us to the mount, right? That's His ultimate goal because He wants to bless us. So He asks of us a thing, knowing that if He asks of us something, He already made the provision. And if I rewind the track in my personal life, I can see and tell you time after time that the Lord made provision, right? And He wanted to see my obedience. After He gave me the provision, if I was going to meet him in the mount, if I was going to trust in him and bring the tithe, if we are obedient and obey his voice and meet him in the mount. When we bring the tithe, he says that there be meat, right, in the storehouse. There should always be substance available. That's the bottom line. It should always be there if we're being obedient to the principle and to God's voice, because he's always giving it to us if we understand how that principle works. So when we are obedient, at that point, he gives it back. Remember, it's a continuous exchange, but the exchange is never on the same level. I love how the Lord looks out for us. That's why he doesn't just want to rescue us. He wants to provide for us. He wants to give it to us freely. He doesn't want to, he can. Now, make no mistake, the Lord can rescue you if you need to be rescued. But imagine you positioning someone to bless you and to provide for you from another place, a place where there is no lack, a place where you don't even have to think about what you desire or what you need, because he already gave it to you. Because Abraham didn't have a son, because Abraham had already lived over half of his life expectancy before God gave him the seed, yet he gave it to him anyway. And that is the way God desires to look out for us and desires to bless us, not just freeing you from confinement, but providing for you. But it only happens when we change the way we position ourselves in God. So I had to learn that. And ever since, I have come to terms with what God desires from me and determine in my heart to be obedient. From that point, every time I give it to him, doesn't matter what it is, every time I meet him in the mount, every time with my actions regarding myself, regarding my health, regarding my career, when I made the decision, each and every time, it requires a made up mind, and not just a made up mind, but your feet got to follow what happens up here. That's what happened with Abraham. The Lord spoke it. Abraham heard it. He made a decision to do it, and his feet started walking. So let your feet follow what's happening up here. And when you make that choice to meet God in the mount, when he sees it, you'll see it. And the next time you see it, it won't be the way you gave it to him. It'll be pressed down, shaken together, and running over. I want to be always seen as a delightsome lamb before the Lord. I want him to look at me and see me as land that he can continue to give seed to. Because when he plants into my life, it will flourish, it will bloom, because this is good ground. I encourage you today to change your position and go from rescue to provide.